Good evening, everyone. I hope you are all well. In light of what is happening around us over the last few days with the troubles up and down the country, but more importantly, the response, um, albeit a very, very worrying one from two-tier care, should be one that worries all of us because this cold, calculated Marxist basically decided to insult everyone who is angry about what is happening, to brand everyone who disagrees with his open border narrative as far right, and effectively threaten the very people that he has been elected to represent. Ultimately, as Prime Minister, it is his job to represent, to act on behalf of, to do his best for, to protect all citizens, whether they voted for him or not. And I think we can agree, most of us, that's the last thing that he is doing. Um, People up and down the country are uh, expressing anger. And yes, amongst that anger, there are just young troublemakers who are actually not helping anything with all of the violence. They're actually playing right into the hands of Starmer and his uh, band of loony lefties. So at this time, uh, I thought that it was time that we discussed, or that I discussed, at the risk of boring you to death, the actual mechanics of social engineering that are at work behind the scenes and have been for not just for decades, but for centuries. Those who lead always try to engineer society to keep themselves in power, to engineer society to comply. There have been many different manners of executing this, um, and even going back to the Romans, that was done with stick and carrot and misdirection. That was the very purpose of the Colosseum. And when it was actually banned, or when gladiatorial fighting was banned by Marcus Aurelius, then after his death, Commodus decided to declare however many days of fighting and death, and it was said of him, he will give them blood and they will love him for it. It was all about misdirection of the people, allow them to direct their anger, their thirst for blood at those in the ring, so that the leadership, the Caesar, could go about his life and his business as he wished. We've seen this fine-tuned over the centuries. In this last century, though, the advancement of social engineering has increased a lot. It increased in the early part of the centuries, through through the 30s in particular. Um, as you're aware, one nutter managed to brainwash an entire nation. But what I started doing today is I published the first chapter, or a segment of my forthcoming book, Social Engineering, Society by Design. I'm hoping to have it finished end of the year, early next year, but it's quite an emotional journey, researching it and learning through it, and it's it's amazing how much it applies to everything that is happening to us today. For years, centuries, those in charge always polarize their population, because by polarizing the population, then you can misdirect people because they are so busy looking at one end or the other. They miss what's happening right in front of them. It's almost like the Houdini effect, where people look to the left, they look to the right, and they're so busy looking at one end or the other, they're missing what's happening in front of them. And we see it again and again, whether it's socialism, capitalism, utopia, dystopia, collectivism, individualism, conservatism, or hedonism. Now, we all have our favourites, and some of the most famous people about socially engineered society, say people like George Orwell, for example, was preceded by others. And in my book, I categorise the different people who have touched on social engineering or even delved deeply within it. And there are quite a few. We've got the philosophers like Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and Marcus Aurelius and Friedrich Nietzsche. And then we've got the literary greats like Aldous Huxley and George Orwell and Ray Bradbury and so on. And then we've got the dictators like Stalin and Pol Pot and Hitler and Mussolini. And then we have the manipulators like George Soros and Zuckerberg and the Bilderbergers and the Rothschilds, all controlling society or influencing it one way or another. In my introduction, I actually include a speech made by Aldous Huxley, who is, along with George Orwell, one of my favourites. And this was made where was it made? At the Berkeley Language Centre in 1962, and it was called The Ultimate Revolution by Aldous Huxley. And in this speech, he documents or he argues that for a totalitarian state to succeed, it still requires some measure of compliance from the people. Because if the people reach a point where they no longer care or no longer fear, then the totalitarianism becomes less effective. So it is only if people comply with the fear, with the threat, that this society can actually continue. But all totalitarian structures have eventually fallen because the people are invariably pushed too far and they reach a point where they fear no longer for their lives, then they become a threat. So, how do you get about this? How do you go about overcoming this? There's various ways of actually doing this, as well as manipulation. The opposite to a totalitarian or conservative totalitarian state is a hedonistic state. And this is an example that Aldous Huxley makes in his book, Brave New World, where effectively the masses are controlled or rendered neutered by being permitted or indeed encouraged to overdose on whatever they want. And creating this hedonistic society then basically nurtures people to a point where they undermine themselves by themselves. And although we tend to hear about that we are heading for George Orwell's 1984, and that, of course, is correct, I actually believe that we are going through and hurtling towards Aldous Huxley's Brave New World first. We only need to look at how so much hedonism is effectively being normalized, and those who object to the normalization of hedonism in our society are preyed upon and threatened, prosecuted, or just made to appear to have prejudice that is unacceptable in this modern liberal so-called utopian society and we are in nothing of, we've got nothing of the sort. And if we then apply that to what has been happening, look at our media, look at the way it is controlled, look at the way that anybody who speaks out and contradicts the narrative is effectively targeted by the media with the same narrative again and again and again. What have we been hearing more and more and more, not just this week, but in recent weeks, months, and years? We have been hearing far right, far right, far right constantly. I don't know if Starmer's cold, sinister speech this week, which was an insult to his citizens, I would argue, and I believe that many people do feel the same, may have pushed them too far. I do believe that to those who are looking, he has revealed his hand, and people are not just responding, but they are effectively daring him. You may be aware there's a hashtag on X, and it is, what is it? Far Right Thugs Unite. If you have a search for that, you will see everyday people, normal, decent people who are reacting to the insult that was applied to them by Starmer in his speech, in that, according to him, they are far right, and they've actually put a hashtag photo selfie. I've done it as well, and far right thugs, hashtag far right thugs unite. So for many people, the game is up. The problem is that it is becoming increasingly more difficult for us to speak out. I wouldn't even put it past this sinister administration to be provoking revolt in order to justify the measures that they want to bring in place. And we must not only be aware of this, but we should have the good sense to be terrified of it, because the final destination of this agenda that we are being subjected to is one that is extremely sinister, and it is always the same scenario. It is those who are intoxicated with wealth and power, going beyond life, going beyond what I would call reality, and into their own delusional world, where they literally have no respect for anyone, and they feel that the masses are simply the plebs that they can do anything that they want with. And for this reason, everything that is happening, not just within the UK, but throughout Europe, is not an accident. This is not just an organic movement, an organic event that has happened spontaneously. There are reasons for what is happening and what has happened, and the reasons are only slowly to be revealed. But in the meantime, the puppet masters are maintaining the pressure on these traitors who we actually foolishly often think that we're electing to act on our behalf and represent us, but they are doing nothing of the sort. They are merely the government hand of the sinister and evil and calculated puppet masters who dictate what is actually happening and what they want to happen and what they want to do to the whole of Europe and the UK. And we, or rather we in our current form, with our current chain of thought, do not fit in with their plans. So they need to change the very way that we think, or effectively erase us as a culture, as an identity, as a nation state or states throughout Europe. Let me just quickly look at the questions. Say hello to everyone. Hello, Peter. Hello, Trish. Hi, everybody. Um, Thank you for joining me. Hello, Sean. And what was this one? I'm beginning to think we are dealing with a form of evil. This is exactly what I'm saying. And I have to say that I've been working on this for about a year and a half now. I'm maybe halfway, 120,000 words or somewhere around there at the moment. Sometimes I need to actually stop because it's incredibly interesting. I haven't studied this academically, so I'm coming from a layman to learn all about it, even though it interests me. And it's incredible that so much of what I'm reading in its time would have been dismissed as delusional, as conspiracy thinking, etc. And yet it is all actually becoming reality. And the direction that we are heading is terrifying. And as I said, when I actually listened to that, dare I even call him a man? Does that man have any humanity to speak to the British people who he should treat with respect? And at the same time, as I said in a quick video that I posted yesterday or the day before, whenever it was, where are they all? Where are all of these elected people? Apart from playing one-upmanship on X with their comments, or if you like, gracing us with a copy of the letter that they've written to the Prime Minister to express their concern about what is happening. Why aren't these members of Parliament actually venturing out where there is trouble and actually taking the brave step to speak to these people? Because whether they are concerned, decent citizens who are in the background upset that people are being violent, but angry themselves with good reason, or even if they are just young rabble raising troublemakers who have turned these into violent protests, which is completely wrong. How about actually standing and speaking to them? How about trying to be a leader? Because a leader is not somebody who literally uses the platform of mainstream national TV to threaten everybody and to actually insult everyone by calling every single person effectively who disagrees with what they are doing a far right fascist. And he dares to point the finger at other people for inciting this. I think he needs to look in the mirror. I don't know what he sees when he looks in the mirror, but whether he sees what we see, I don't know. So how to get a vote of no confidence by his cabinet? Is it the majority or all MPs have to vote no confidence? I'm afraid so, yes. The MPs, they need a certain amount. I forgot the figure, I'm sorry. And then they have to have a vote of no confidence. And if it's above a certain amount, then he can be removed, or they have to call a leadership, etc. It's very difficult at this point because we have been saddled with this sinister, deranged, deluded monster, and you have to be a monster. I apologize if that's over the top, but people in this country we all know, not just cost of living, not just housing, not just violence or fear of violence, um, all of the different issues that we are facing. And rather than actually lead, rather than listen, rather than to show the people the one thing that they really deserve and never get from leaders, show the people respect. Because even the most chaotic and aggressive of youngsters or collection of youngsters would probably listen if they were spoken to with respect. And more importantly, if they were listened to. Yes, it's a risk. But hey, if you're not prepared to take a risk, if you're not prepared to stand in the line of fire, what on earth are you doing standing to lead a country? Because there was a time when that was the first requirement to lead, was that the leader would be at the front going into battle in whatever form that may be. Maybe our what we're fighting has changed, how we fight has changed, but ultimately the leader should be at the front. They, not just he, but all of the different MPs should have been in their constituencies if there was any problems, and they should have been there speaking to the people and not leaving until they actually placated everyone and listened to everyone, rather than just jetting off on holiday and posting virtue signaling posts to appear to show their concern. I'm very concerned. I'm very upset. Oh, really? Are you? How about doing your job that you were elected to do? There is something wrong, scary about this scenario that's playing out. I'm afraid so. And it does concern me very, very much. It's actually terrifying me because I can see where it's going, and we don't deserve to be taken down that road. But there is a problem here, and that problem is as follows: it is the good nature of British people. This is the problem, because every time there is something like this, and we've had many instances of it over the decades for various reasons, it seems that they always manage to placate and fob the people off with nothing. And then they go on to do what they want to do anyway. So there comes a point where the people need to understand that we can stop and we can object to and stop what is happening, but it won't be done with hooliganism. That is counterproductive. That is playing right into their hands. We have taken steps backwards this week because we have given this nutcase, we've given him grounds to bring in more laws. And even though he says he's going to use existing laws, as far as I'm concerned, he stood there and he basically threatened to introduce his own personal Stasi, who will be out there go hunting down everybody who dares to speak out, because this people who are inciting violence, this is a very dangerous one. What exactly does that mean and how? Um, that is a catch all that is very, very dangerous. And he emphasized that, and yet he stood there. Well, actually, the day before or 2 days before, he had gone up to Southport to get his photos and lay his flowers, cold as ice, and didn't even stop to speak to anyone. I think that offended people throughout the country. And if there is anybody, person or persons, who had incited this violence. It is the monster who attacked those girls. It is this arrogant monster who has threatened his entire voter base, and the fact that there has been further insult added to injury by their clear and obvious and unapologetic two-tier policing. That we've seen it again and again and again. Most of the youngsters that have been out causing trouble, hooligans, as I've said, for the main part, apart from one or two who had flare guns or whatever it is that they had that sounded like gunfire, bricks and sticks and stones, etc. But at the same time, there was another group of people out with machetes running up and down the streets. I never saw a single one of those arrested. I saw them arrest an old lady. I saw them arrest a young lady. I saw somebody who was just standing there in Whitehall and was actually doing nothing, and the police just launched an attack on him and began to beat him up. These we've seen with our own eyes, and we know it to be true. So for him to try to pass the blame onto other people who are understandably at the end of their tether shows that he is no leader, and he is not morally or intellectually or emotionally qualified to be a prime minister. Have you read the book called Revelations by Xavier Reyes? Well, I haven't read that. Would you recommend it? Okay, hello. Right, what have we got here? Okay, petition. There is a petition you can sign, No Confidence in Labour Government on change.org. If any of you post it, I will share it. Okay, also, believe in one narrative. All arguments have more than one side, but there seems to be just the same narrative. Absolutely. We must be able to have proper debate. And this all goes back to democracy once again. Something that they have been trying or actively eroding for years and years now, one way or another. Everything that they've been doing, not just since Blair, even though he clearly accelerated things, it was happening before him. But devolving Parliament, that effectively weakened Parliament and caused fractures within the United Kingdom. This lot are talking about devolving yet more powers from Parliament. So what they are doing is they are removing the centre of our democracy by stealth until such time as we wake up one day and our Parliament will be little more than just a show, because they won't really be able to do anything about anything. Indeed, if you watch live Parliament now, is it really Parliament? Is there anybody who's actually making any argument? They make token gestures that they disagree this and disagree with that, and little speeches. But these people, they're all on the same team. That's just how it seems to be, because none of them are actually attacking this administration. And if there's an administration that's easy to find faults with, it is this one, because they have not done one single thing right since they got into power. It's a month now, and all they have done is laid the foundations to completely destroy our country, our culture, our rights, our freedom, everything. And they are getting to the point where they are almost shamelessly arrogant about it. When we have people who have suffered what has happened over the last few days, And the Prime Minister actually, on top of the millions that have been set aside to protect a certain demographic 2 or 3 years ago, allocates X amount of millions more to protect them, but nothing for everyday British people, nothing for Jewish people. What is the message being sent out by this nutcase? I think it speaks for itself. Garish, demand a vote of no confidence against the Labour Party. Our problem at the moment is this: we need to have an alternative ready. This is one of the reasons that I have been arguing that we need to implement uh, democratic members within reform, something straightforward. And this is not about neutering the party or anything of the sort, but I passionately believe that local supporters in each constituency should be voting members, and those members should elect their local candidates, because at the moment all of the candidates are just spokespersons. There's been no movement yet. I'm sure they've got things planned, but it's too slow. The candidates should have been elected in already, and we should be fighting this fight from now, not when this government's about to fall, not when an election is called, whether it is by their own choice or be they forced to do so, but we need to be fighting now. And the best way to have a strong and formidable and united fighting force is to ensure that the people are engaged, that they select their local candidate, they know who he or she is, they meet with their candidate, should they wish, at least once a month, so that it is a team effort, and that team effort should be replicated in every constituency throughout the country, because this is a serious fight. It really, really is, because we are fighting for our freedom, and that is not an exaggeration. It not by a long shot. This guy wants to go after anyone who speaks out against the tyranny that they have in mind. This is a Marxist. This is a left wing fanatic, and all of his cabinet are the same. They hate our culture, our freedom, our voice, our opinions, our history, our heritage, and our borders, and our racial demographic makeup. That is for certain. And once again, this is direct instructions from their puppet masters. Under one demographic, they want to push the destruction of borders and cultures and identities. They will deal with that culture, that demographic, at a later date. That demographic is not being supported because they have any believe in them. It is the manner that they it is a method to a means to an end for what they want to do. Yes, it is, and we must defend it, and we need to do it correctly. We must do everything we can to stop the violence, because this is playing into their hands. And if we go further down the road that they may very well take us down, it's going to make it much, much harder for us to speak out about anything. It's always the same: create a problem, terrify the people, offer a solution. But the solution is not a solution that we would want. That's a solution for what they want to achieve. Sorry, what was this one? Kostama is dictator in the making. If just one states their dissatisfaction on him, can he suspend them? If just one, do you mean just one MP? Well, he took the whip away from 7 the other day in a show of, in a show of look at me, I'm strong. Um, he's he's cold and calculated, and he will be going out after anyone who speaks out. And as I said, the incitement to violence is so subjective, it's really, really, really difficult, because how dare they and his media point the finger at the people who we know who they're pointing the finger at? Um, Not one of them has called for violence. On the contrary, every single one of them, of the names that I'm seeing, you may have seen an image with what is it, about 10, 15 different people on, and it is, they are all being accused of being the ones who are inciting this civil unrest, and yet every one of them actually has done the complete opposite. But they keep pushing this narrative, they keep pushing this far right narrative, because they know a large portion of this population just sit down, watch the BBC, and actually believe them. And if there is a media platform which is lying to the people, misrepresenting the truth, it is the BBC. When you go online, people have, or should have, the right to express themselves. Now, if they are using an illegal term for anyone or anything, that is another matter. But if people have an opinion, and that opinion is one that they do not like this or that, or disagree with this or that, or they suspect that it was Mrs. Jones with the steel bar in the kitchen, allegedly, does that mean that they are actually spreading misinformation? Do they think that the only way people draw any conclusions is that they go onto YouTube and just listen to everybody on there and believe them 100%? Um, that is not how it is. But they are trying to convince us that's how things are. And once again, it is all about polarization. To have, on the one hand, everyone in this instance now, we are uh, democracy, which is complete and utter rubbish, um, which they are arguing, or far right. That's how they're trying to play it now. It's always linear, always linear. And as I said, this is a Houdini diagram, because while you're too busy looking to the left or the right, you don't see the elephant in the room right in front of you. And it's also incorrect, because by polarizing uh, people's, people based on their opinion or what their beliefs, you're actually then setting them that they are miles apart, when in fact they're not. Because the reality is, with all of the influences, socially and political, they're not linear. They're more like a Venn diagram, and they all overlap. And this is how, if you think of a Venn diagram, you think of the Olympic rings, and you see them, how close they are and they overlap, then perhaps it could make it easier for me to make the point of how easily it is for some society to change completely by stealth, because while we're busy looking in one direction, then something right next to us simply becomes the dominant force, the dominant narrative, the dominant demographic, or God forbid, the dominant belief. Uh, the one I called has to resign. Please check the other two. I will sign it, Trish. We need 100,000 minimum, though. Yes, absolutely. Yes, he will, as they have done constantly. And unfortunately, I've been on a local Facebook page, and there are people who still believe KS acts in the best interest of this country. That is what is really worrying. Herein lies the problem. Okay, and sod off. I've seen a vid basically saying, yes, boats should be stopped now. He's backtracking. Surely that first statement was just the vote catcher. So can't he be sacked for basically mis-selling? But they're doing that with everything. We know for a fact that Rachel Reeves had access to every single detail about government finances, debts, future plans, taxes that are in place or impending, etc., etc. And yet, as soon as they got in, she began selling it to us that things have been left so much better than what they had thought by the Conservative government, that there's this black hole and therefore we have to take the winter fuel allowance away from 10 million pensioners. How disgraceful. And yet, at the same time, you have got this moron, Ed Miliband, who is determined to be a virtue signalling champion and give away 11.7 billion to other countries to assist them with their drive to net zero. That's 11.7 billion. Now, from trashing independent schools by adding VAT to school fees, they plan to raise 1.7 billion, which they won't. They won't raise anything. It will be negligible, and by within a year or two, it will be a net loss, because tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of children will be pulled out of independent schools, because adding VAT to school fees, which average 18,000 a year, that's £3,600 per year per child on top of what they're paying now. And the vast majority of parents who send their children to independent schools are not wealthy. At least 90%, if not more, actually have to make ends meet to pay those fees. So they probably won't be able to pay the extra, which means the children will be taken out, put into mainstream schools. So not only will they lose 3,600 per child in VAT, they will also have to absorb the cost of £5,000 or £6,000 or £7,000 per year per child, who then goes into mainstream education. So we're pushing 10,000 already lost that they had not accounted for, and that's before school closures, teachers losing their jobs, all of the ancillary staff, and so on and so on and so forth. I think the strike point, as I've said before, is somewhere between 100 and 150,000 pupils leaving independent schools will take their 1.7 billion anticipated tax revenue from independent schools down to zero. And any more than that, they'll actually be making a net loss. But they don't care, because this is not about the money. It is about destroying independent schools. There will be no free thinking under two-tier Keir's government. I thought the prisons were full, no resources for the police, yet all of a sudden there seems to be plenty of cash to splash. Yes, well, they're emptying the prisons by cutting people's uh, minimum time to 40%, which means that thousands of criminals are being released. And I'm sure it's being done quietly, so that all those people who thought they had got justice by their attackers, the criminals who had wronged them, having gone to prison for 10 years, for example, are being released after just 4. That is not good. I know, perhaps too much fake stream media. We need to create movement promoting Christian values and act as united public. Take the eyes from Tommy. Now, this is really important, because the process of eroding the very structure of this country has actually been facilitated by those who have been, if you like, pushing the the argument of undermining Christianity. It's not about how religious you are or not. It is Christianity is not about whether Lot's wife turned into a pillar of salt or not, or whether the Red Sea did indeed or did not part. It is about the moral compass that has traditionally been instilled into all of us as we go through school and grow up and so on. And we've reached a point now where even some of the most ardent atheists are actually questioning whether they have contributed to this by being so vehemently outspoken against Christianity, because they have actually been given a lot of support and a lot of airtime. And the same thing again, we, out of all of the good people who are out there, will hear about the dozen or 2 dozen or whatever priests who are on planet Zog. It's all part of the same agenda to undermine the church, to undermine Christianity. But it's not about the church and just the church and Christianity. It is undermining the very foundations of our society, and that is what is actually happening. So we have an aggressive, invasive species heading for Europe with an agenda. And there is an agenda, full stop. That agenda is global dominance. No matter what anybody may tell you, that is the agenda. And the reason that they are here, because many people would argue, well, why are they here if they despise us so much? That is the very reason that they're here. They are here to literally take up the fight against us. So they are at war with us, full stop. If they were not, they would renounce any uh, any belief in a global caliphate. They would renounce any belief in killing the unbelievers. They would renounce any support for Sharia, and they would renounce it 100% and unreservedly. If they do not renounce it, this is not a sit on the fence scenario where, unfortunately, once again, this is British tolerance and kindness, taking it for granted. I know somebody who's of this particular faith, but they're very moderate. They don't really care. Have they spoken out to condemn it? If they have not, they are either or. There is no in the middle. Everyone who does not speak out against it privately supports it. Otherwise, they would. I would. I would not hesitate. Not that Not that, for example, there is any call to arms, if you like, in the New Testament, but if in the Old Testament, where there's quite a lot, um, I would quite willingly renounce any of that, because I don't want to see violence between within humanity. The you know I want to see us just defend ourselves, not to attack anyone else for what they do in their own country, for what they believe, for who they are, or anything of the sort. I wouldn't hesitate to renounce anything that could remotely be interpreted to support violence against other people. So why can't they do the same? If they don't, or they won't, then there's a reason. Maybe King Charles should dissolve Parliament. I think I would prefer martial law for a year or two compared to this. Oh, now that really is a dangerous one. Of course, as we know, legally he can, but constitutionally it would be catastrophic. I don't know where he stands on any of this. Really, I don't. I have no clue. Um, and that there has been yes, I've heard that too. So I really, really don't know, to be honest. All I know is that if we are going to go forward, we must go forward democratically, because martial law, who do you think it will be the targets, God forbid, if there's martial law? And when he was actually making his speech, I literally got a shiver, and I thought, this guy is tempted to announce a state of emergency. And if that were to happen, or if it does happen, then I don't need to tell you who will be the target and who will be the ones who will be protected. He will drop his land when they have served their purpose. The guy is a menace. Yes, absolutely. As I said, um, the the whole continent of Europe is literally being overwhelmed, and the reason for it is for the reasons that I have said: an end to the nation states, the identity, culture, destroying that which has made us strong and kept us strong for centuries. But finally, now they are bringing the enemy in disguise, so there won't be a front line. There will not be another battle of Vienna that ended the advancement of the Ottomans. This is a battle of treachery, a battle of deceit, and a battle that will be fought from within, that is being fought from within. Uh, yes, it will. Islam will drop him. They did it in Persia. Got the liberals on side, got Shah, turned Persia into Islamic country, to liberals who had to flee, or much worse. And the greatest irony is the nation that is actually enduring the greatest number of apostates is Iran. Over 50,000 out of 70,000 mosques have closed. They are holding on. This collection of fanatics are literally holding on by the skin of their teeth, and it only needs something to happen from within, and the people of Iran will actually take their country back. If there's a nation who want to take their country back, it is the Iranian people. Liberals. Demand change, demand vote, petition names, links on your phone. Thank you. I really wish, starting with these riots, I really wish we could have done more. Obviously, I have no authority to go to speak to anyone. But if I were an MP, then I would have actually ventured out, and I would have actually taken the risk to stand there and speak to them. We need to begin to realize that when people get pushed too far, then the rational becomes irrational. And once people do become irrational, then they go off on all sorts of tangents. Some of them are violent or mob-handed. Some people literally go to ground. Some people decide that they've had enough and leave the country, whatever it may be. But how have people reached this point? This is what we need to ask ourselves. And why is it that whenever it is a different demographic who protests, who riots, who causes damage, the policy is one to placate and to speak to community leaders and offer more money and give them more rights, etc. And yet, when British people are pushed over the edge, they are demonized, they are hunted down, and they are treated with the greatest disrespect I've seen in any democratic nation around the world, to be honest. This Great Britain energy, it's going to cost billions, and it won't do us any favours whatsoever. No favours at all. We should be energy independent, and we're not. And this lot are going to make things even worse. Maybe the end of days is playing out as prophesied many thousands of years ago. It may well be the case. Keep you warm, provide light too, win-win. That was your candles. Yes, absolutely. Well, again, as I said, if we look at how it's all playing out, it is all a mind controlling game. It is all social engineering. We're at the point where nearly everybody now self censors. I shouldn't say this and I shouldn't say that. And then it's gone beyond that to I shouldn't think this and I shouldn't think that. And people don't even stop to question why they feel that they shouldn't think this or that or say this or that. Okay, with what you say, we know what the law is, but we've allowed these catch-all laws to be put into place one after another, and they've used every single opportunity to implement laws against us, whether it was crime, terrorism, minorities, by gender, by sexuality, whatever it is. Everyone has been exploited to bring in laws which, in actual fact, erode our freedom or erode the freedom of the majority, of the masses. And now, this week, we have basically been told that we are the ones in the wrong, that we are the ones to blame, that we do not deserve any protection from the gangs who have been running around with machetes, and that money will be allocated to protect the very people who many people in this country fear, to protect the demographic which is ultimately responsible for so many wrongs in our country. But they are protecting them, and anybody who speaks out against it is instantly labelled far right. They may have gone too far this time. I believe that he definitely has, but has he gone far enough for the British to stop actually making allowances because it is in their good nature to do so? Because if, or when rather, everything that's happening fizzles out, have no doubt that over the next few months they will bring in measures to actually be able to terrify all of us into not daring to speak out again. This is the direction that they are going. But at least the alarm is going off and waking us up. Absolutely. The risk is that we overshoot things and it turns into civil unrest or worse. None of us want to see that. That is why whatever we do, we can't overemphasize that it must be done peacefully. In everything we say, we must emphasize it. And taking into account what this nutter has said, or rather, what this nutter has threatened us with this week, then it is in everyone's interest, in anything you say in public or online about anything to do with this, to make it clear that you condemn violence, because we are literally heading in the direction of a knock on the door of all dissenters, all those who speak out, and they are demonizing anyone who stands against them. And yet the real demons are the ones who are in control, unfortunately. Do you think Starmer's behaviour is normal? Because I swear he's on the autism spectrum. His behaviour is absolutely not normal. He is dangerous, and he is watching actually his facial expressions, his body language. He actually borders on. Uh, I don't know about. I don't know about the spectrum. I think he borders on basically being a psychopath, to be honest. Do you want to stay nice to be granted? Peaceful numbers are needed. Yes, we need peaceful numbers, and those numbers must not be tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands. They need to be millions. That's what we need. And we almost need to maintain over 1 million people in Whitehall, throughout Trafalgar Square, almost on shifts. People arrive and relieve someone and they leave, to keep a net number of over 1 million there sat down until this lot listen and step down, because they do not have a democratic mandate to be doing this to us. They do not have a democratic mandate to be pushing poor people into suffering cold through the winter. They do not have the democratic mandate to be threatening us with their own private Stasi. They do not have the democratic mandate to open the floodgates and accelerate the demographic genocide of people in this country. Cultural, political, and demographic destruction of our society. And that is what they are doing on 33% of votes cast. And yet, out of all people registered to vote, 80% don't want them. And yet, there they are, with a huge majority actively plotting to destroy our country and to punish anyone who objects to them destroying it. Absolutely. Yeah, on that note, as I said, I'll be publishing more excerpts from my forthcoming book as I go in posts. If it's up your street, if it's something that you're very interested in, and you'd like to contribute some ideas and suggestions, I'd be very grateful. It's fascinating researching into it, but with what is happening, it's also terrifying because it's at the forefront of my mind. I'm obviously careful that it doesn't become my main focus, because I'm here to just discuss what I see is happening, rather than just be here to just to just be prophesizing doom and gloom, because it's not, and it need not be. As I've said before, we are able to turn this around. We are able to take back control of our country and restore democracy. Not that we've ever had proper democracy. I should rephrase that. To implement democracy, that should be our first and foremost objective, because these people absolutely hate democracy. This is why the far left always resort to labels, to threats, to name calling. And it is all about misdirection and misinformation. Here we've got Keir Starmer stood there threatening everybody about misinformation, and yet if you go onto X and look up what Nick Lowles is posting, it is a constant stream of bile, and it varies from his statutory "I'm terrified, this is terrifying, I'm frightened," etc., to complete untruths. I think the other day he mentioned that here's an interesting one, that he had heard that there had been 2 acid attacks somewhere, and then afterwards he then put, "Oh, I'm not really sure." Um, he's one of the worst of all, and if there are people who are inciting violence, then it is not the names that they keep telling us who are inciting the violence. It is people like Nick Lowles, it is Starmer himself, and most of all, the monster who took a knife to innocent children. And I wonder if you could help me here, actually. Why is it that ever since he was whatever age, the photo that we've seen when he was a child, why is it that from then until now, I've not actually seen anybody appear to who went to school with him, who knows anything about him? Uh, he'll be 18 on Wednesday, day after tomorrow. Let's see if we actually do see adult pictures, photos of him, because something is not right there. I don't know what it is, but we've been told, allegedly, this is his name, true or false, and this is what he looked like a few years ago. I've seen an artist impression, that's all. But with somebody who's so prolific, why haven't there been dozens of people who he went to school with or interacted with, albeit that he was a recluse? Did he never go to school? Did he leave school at 10 years old and never go back since? I'm not really sure. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are, or if you've thought of anything along those lines, or if I've missed something here. I'm not really certain. We'll see after Wednesday. Sorry, let me just go back to these. I'm sorry if I miss anything, guys. We are far the greatest democrat in the UK. Absolutely. We are. We will prevail. We must do it peacefully. We must stand strong, and we must not allow ourselves to be fobbed off because anything they anything that they promise in order to diffuse the anger of the people is little more than lies and false promises. We must campaign strongly in the strongest possible form to bring this wretched administration down. And at the same time, as I keep repeating, we need to ensure that there is an alternative in place. I don't see a single, outside of Suella, I don't see a single Conservative who deserves to be voted back in. And as I've said before, if Suella were to move to reform, the rest of the Conservatives, the wets, they might as well just merge with Labour as well, because they're all much of a muchness. There's nothing to divide them. What about the so-called acid attack that has brought the Muslim community out? I don't know. Is that the one that you're referring to that Nick Lowles posted a couple of days ago? And then he put, well, I'm not so sure. He really, I don't know what made him hate everybody so much, but I see him as at school he was a prefect and a little snitch, and nobody liked him, and nobody's really liked him ever since. And he just sits there. He's this sad, pathetic keyboard warrior who's just out there, literally just stirring up under the banner that he wants peace. No, he wants nothing of the sort. Yeah, I believe so. So I'm just curious. I'm waiting to see on Wednesday what happens. On Wednesday, he's 18, so effectively they should release current photos of him. What about the people he went to school with? And if he was weird, strange, recluse, whatever it may be, then I'm sure there would be more reason that other pupils from his schools would remember him, because they would have noticed that he's the one who's a bit strange or whatever. We've not had anything. Fine, under 18, perhaps. Come Wednesday, though, I would expect that we would see proper identification who he is now. And once again, I don't remember that Doctor Who children in need video or anything like that. So I don't know how accurate anything is that we've been told, but I have question marks about everything. How active is Heritage Party? I really don't know, to be honest. I really, really don't know. All I know is that it's not enough to just posture. It's not enough to just uh, appear to be the strong voice or the voice of opposition. You need to be the voice of opposition. And I'm not seeing anybody take the bull by the horns. And there was opportunity through this week, because it didn't necessarily need to be the MP in that constituency who went to speak to them. That would have been best. That would have been the best thing. But maybe I'm asking too much. Maybe the norm is that when they're elected, that they'll just spend the next 5 years, if they last that long, which they won't, fobbing everybody off and just making the odd token gesture to appear that they're doing their job, but in reality, are they? Down with red and blue, up with reform. Absolutely. Did you listen to Jim Davidson about him, the killer? He seemed to know something. If, i.e., he believes genocide for the UK. Yes. Again, I'll tread carefully with what I say here, if you understand. But I'm very concerned, and that we have to get the message across, and it has to be one of peace. And ultimately, let me put it to you another way. Those of you who are here watching, or your friends, or whoever, some of you may be more in favour of let's get rid of this left and right to begin with. Let's throw that out, and let's throw Labour and Conservative out, because they've just merged into this mush. Let's just consider that where it really started. Are you more for higher taxes and bigger state and more benefits for people, or are you more lower taxes, smaller state, less benefits for people? It's one or the other, effectively. That is the foundation reality if we're talking about a society that is more capitalist or more socialist. The rest has been bolted on, if you like. There isn't anything wrong with either argument. And in fact, we should be arguing every point on a case by case basis from these different opinions to reach the best result. Because ultimately, a society that has zero income tax and hardly any capital gains tax, etc., but has no national health service, no free schooling, no free anything, is that a society that we want? I would say not. On the other hand, do we want a society that we had in the 70s, where the highest rate of tax, the marginal rate was 85%, and the highest rate on unearned went as high as 98%, where those who generate money had so little incentive to do so that they all left, and effectively the country went bankrupt. And Edward Heath basically begged to get into the EU, went cap in hand to the IMF because the country was on the floor. Well, what do you expect when people are working and you are taking most of it? So there is an argument on both sides, and we must have that argument in a civilized and ongoing manner about everything. There is no need for people who lean one way or the other to be hating each other. Where has this toxicity come from? We need to be able to debate these issues, and I am of the opinion that whatever side of the financial centre ground you are, that you should not just express your opinion and be free to, unhindered, but also be willing to accept the other opinion. And each side should be able to present their argument unvarnished and clear and without condemnation and without being labelled. Then we might just be able to work towards a better society, where we do have what we need, but at the same time we're taking steps to ensure that our humanely based society is not being abused. But we cannot in any way be the host for an increasing number of parasites who are feeding from the host, because the host will die. Absolutely. Democracy, but proper democracy. Had to go on my old phone and old name because it threw me off and won't let me back in. And welcome. Okay, I'm sorry I've waffled on again. Do apologise. Always seems to happen. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have I got my email up here? I'm not sure if I have. I need to put it here. You can always WhatsApp me. There you go, and I'll add my email to here for next time. I'm so sorry. I should have it there. I'd love to hear from you if you have an opinion, suggestion for me, whether it's about what I've said, what I've covered, what you'd like me to cover, whether you agree with me, disagree with me. I'm always happy to hear from everyone, because that's how it should be. But most importantly, what matters to me is to raise questions and inspire you to raise questions, and hopefully we can all be agreed that no matter where we stand, we do want our country to be peaceful. We don't want it to be ripped apart. We don't want our society, our community, our heritage, our culture, and our way of life to be threatened by anyone. And in that regard, we must be very, very strong. I've met a few, but I don't know any personally. But I have noticed, standing as a reform candidate, I did notice the immediate hostility from quite a few people, and in some cases, I could literally just shirk it off. But there were instances where it was people who I knew, people I've known most of my life, who I noticed suddenly turned and were hostile because I was standing for reform, and because I was standing up, and they are so deeply Labour ingrained. It is not just shocking, but it's almost terrifying. Yes, of course. Have a wonderful time. Don't forget to visit Rhondda. It's definitely worth it if you hire a car, of course. Have a great time, and I'll catch up with you when I get back. Or you can watch them; they'll be on even in my live streams. You can always watch them whenever you have time. Anyway, 100 yes, absolutely. And this is not just the UK. This is all of Europe, and we owe it to each other. EU aside, they don't count. Individual countries, they do count, and it is our history, all of our battles, all of our cultural, uh, you know, all of our cultural characteristics, good and bad, that make up all of these European nation states, and none of them should be at risk of being overrun or being demographically erased. And this is the risk that we face. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, everybody. Wonderful as always. I shall see you again soon, and have a wonderful evening. Bye bye for now. Bye.